And we are on with Nick Goldner. Nick is a PhD and a founder at Stealth Fintech company. He's also an angel investor. So we're gonna talk about fintech. We're gonna talk about YC startups and growth. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start a podcast like this one, it can help you monetize it very quick with YouTube AdSense, with sponsors, and with lead gen. You can go to podbear.com, download our free ebook there, and attend our masterclass. Nick, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, man. I got my PhD at WashU in St. Louis. Really focusing on like why do things survive in really hostile environments. So for me, it's always been like understanding evolution, adaptation, and change. Like, what are the things that go into a particular system? How does that particular system adapt to that input? And what are the things that you get out of it? And so I've applied that to a bunch of different companies. I'm most recently applying this to a fintech, the system that I'm working on right now. And yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is just like, making sure that I understand how things evolve and adapt over time. So yeah.
Love it. So, should we talk about tardigrades today or about startup growth?
Oh man, well, I was actually thinking of talking about kiteboarding. Yeah,
Kiteboarding, shit. Yeah, that's a tough one to survive and not break your neck, right?
well, so so in June actually, so I was in the process of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life earlier this summer. I had stepped down from my previous company as CEO. I was just kind of exhausted in that role. And I wanted to move into like, marketing and business development, more the product side of things. And I was kiteboarding. I had a whole bunch of like, what's the word I'm looking for? In the back of your head when you're like, I shouldn't be doing this for all of these reasons.
Right.
I was like forcing it, right? Like I was like, this is like the third or fourth time that I've come out. Like I'm going to go, right? And so I walk in and like as I'm like putting on my impact vest, I'm like, well, maybe I don't need this, I shouldn't be like that big of a deal. And like earlier I had like this like seat harness which like has like all this padding around your hips and your lower back. And I was like, maybe I'll get like one of the waist harnesses. They're a little bit more like, easier to maneuver in. I'm walking, I have this giant kite. I'm like, this wind is too gusty. And like all these things are kind of like going on in the back of my mind. I get there, pump up the kite. I asked this woman to like, help me launch the kite. And she's like, I don't know if I'm qualified. And like, if someone says that, you should trust them. And I was like, well, how many times have you done it? And I was like, and she was like, I don't know, 40 or 50 times. And I'm like, that's way more than I've done it. So like, you're more qualified than I am. So you get all, you're all connected. You have like this, you're physically connected to this giant like sail, right? That goes up into the air. And you're supposed to have your hand on the eject like at all times when you're not like using the kite. The space between where I was and where I needed to be was all muddy. And I was like, nothing could possibly go wrong in like the 5 seconds, like 15 feet that's going to take for me to get where I need to go. And as I'm walking, all of a sudden I hear, oh no. And then I get ripped down to the ground, like face like right into the mud. I'm dragged about 100 feet across the beach. I like twist myself around so that I can like actually like get to the eject button. But I have this moment where I'm like, maybe I can save it, right? Like maybe I can get the kite back up into the air. It could be fine. And so like if you want to like launch yourself up into the air, what you do is you create as much tension as possible between the kite and yourself. And usually you're over water. Yeah. I was on a beach and I was being dragged across rocks and boulders. And so
Kids watching.
Yeah, everyone's watching, right? Like people are like, good Lord, like this is going to go really horribly wrong.
Going to die.
Right. No, that's exactly what they're thinking. And so like I have like the most tension possible because I'm like up against these rocks. And I pull the bar back and I launch myself about 15 feet into the air just as this gust of wind comes. And if you've ever seen the Avengers where like Hulk smashes Loki onto the ground, that's what ended up happening. And so I get picked up, right, 15 feet up into the air. I get smashed onto the ground about 50 feet away, and then I get picked up again and like, dragged across some boulders before I'm finally able to eject. So I'm up in the air, and like the very first thing I think is like, I shouldn't eject now because I'm too high up. Like that's going to be like really bad. But then like once you hit the ground, like there was just no time before you get like dragged across the boulders. Right. So like you're just there. So my first thought was like, don't die. I really wanted to do this over water. Like that would have been way more fun. But instead, like first thing was like, don't die. Then the second thing was like, don't get paralyzed. So I'm on these boulders and I'm like, I have to stand up. So I get up like immediately, which is not a good idea. Like, cause you could probably injure yourself more. And like, I'm like, okay, like things are going wrong. I start taking off my impact vest and I'm like, maybe like I broke my collarbone. No, I actually dislocated 5 of my ribs and I relocated them while I was walking over to like this like thing. And that was the moment where I realized like, oh crap, like I really need to like go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so like this guy comes over and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, you need to call an ambulance like right now. And he goes, are you sure you walked over here? Like, it seems like you're fine. And I'm like, are you ghosting me into like calling an ambulance? Call an ambulance. Like, just fucking call an ambulance. The very next person to come over is like this like ex-trauma surgeon from Stanford. Because it's like right by where the Facebook offices are, is where I was doing it. And he was like, it's okay. I saw what happened. Like, don't worry. And I kept like asking about like where my stuff was. And he's like, do you have like a brain injury? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, I just want my stuff. And he's like, that is like the least of your concerns. Like you might have like a traumatic, like back injury or whatever. And so I get in, the ambulance finally arrives. I'm getting put into this ambulance. And all of a sudden I hear, you guys, we have a rotation system for a reason. We all know that these are the interesting cases. We don't need 5 fucking crews coming to like this thing. That's why we have a rotation. There's one road in and out. Like all of you have to fucking go back. And like, so like, like the thing that was going through my mind as like all the endorphins are going through my head is like, me, interesting, moi, like, and so they actually had to take me to Stanford via helicopter because there was like an accident and they had to give me all these pain meds, and it was pretty brutal. But
Right.
yeah.
So when did that happen again?
So that happened in June of this year. I broke my back, 5 ribs got dislocated. I messed up this wrist. I had a cut down to my shin bone on one of my legs, and I had a bruise about this big on the back of my shoulder from where I landed on the boulders. But yeah, no, I'm all good now. I can walk. All my fingers and toes work. So
How did that change the course of your life?
Yeah. So it was one of the main reasons why I decided to leave the company that I was working on previously. Basically, like what I felt like was that the company was very much like the kiteboarding accident that I was like going through, right? Either I could continue and like hold on and like try to do something, and like get like really just badly hurt, like in a whole bunch of different ways, whether it was like emotionally, professionally, financially, or I could let go and try something else.
And why was it so hard, that company? Was the biotech one, Resistance Bio?
Yeah. So the main reason why it was so difficult was because the reason why I started the company was because a good family friend of mine had passed away from metastatic breast cancer. And so it's kind of like working therapy where I was trying to do something to, in memory of somebody who died, right? There was nothing that I could do to like, save this person. There was nothing like they wouldn't know I was doing it. But like, it was kind of like that working therapy. And I realized that it just wasn't good for the culture and for the company, right? Like,
Right.
So we brought on a CEO. He was much more operationally focused, which was great. But I think the big thing that I realized is like when you're running a company and when you start a company, like, it's kind of like being a captain of a ship and then like, becoming a crew member. It's just awkward in a lot of ways. And I realized that there was really no amount of money that I could get paid in order to stay at that company. And so like, having a near death experience where you're like, not only could I have almost died, but I could have almost got paralyzed. I could have almost, almost. You reprioritize what you want in life.
Right.
And I realized, yeah. And so I realized that this just wasn't what I wanted to do.
And what's new? Like, why a fintech? Because you went from passion to profits, it seemed, like, and that's ironic to me because most YC companies, they choose profits like 98% of the time. So yeah, the new fintech one, is it like profits driven mostly?
No. So what it ended up being is selling science to scientists is nearly impossible, right?
Right.
Like a scientist's job is to tell you that they're the smartest person on earth.
Yep.
Their job is to always be right, and it's their job to basically make you feel stupid if you're
To
not.
be skeptic, yeah.
Yeah. Like I can do it. Like why the hell do you? And so being, a younger guy, working in a space that is dominated by much older guys, like a lot of the guys that I'm trying to convince like that they need to do something differently. Like they have as many years of experience as I have like alive, right?
Right.
The difference is that like, most of these people have a very deep, long experience and a very narrow set of, things. Like they're really good at preclinical research, or they're really good at like translational research, but they haven't been at a whole bunch of different companies. And so for me, I've been able to take drugs from like all the way from inception through like, post commercialization, like looking at like how they actually develop. I took one drug from discovery to basically up to the clinic, and then I started this pharma services company working with basically a whole bunch of cancer companies, and so we worked with them from early discovery all the way through to post commercialization and then retranslation. So I saw the entire process, at every stage from the very beginning all the way to the end, not just in my own company, but across like 10 or 15 other companies. And so the context that I have relative to somebody who's been working at the same company in the same role in the same industry, oftentimes in like the same field, like the same indications, like they're working on like cardiovascular disease their entire life, preclinically. That's their world, right? And so to come and say like, hey, your world actually fits in this broader context, and if you do your job just a little bit better, it makes everybody else's job easier. It's kind of insulting, right?
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, how dare you tell me that I'm not doing my job correctly? And it's like, you're not telling them that you're not doing their job correctly. It's like, this is how you can like fit into the system that you're already working in better, right? And so
Yeah, that's scientists, right? Like
yeah.
that's pretty bad for our world. Granted that science is mostly responsible for the advancement in humanity, and granted that scientists are in charge of these systems, that's pretty bad for this world. And everything that you're mentioning does resonate. So yeah, that must have been quite frustrating for you to hit that wall over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but this is not something new. Like I was my dad owns an office furniture store, and so like in 2007 2008, during the economic crisis, my job was a salesperson to sell like furniture to like people who were like, I just laid off 30%.
Why don't you buy a desk, John?
Right, like why do I need more like furniture? And it was always like, well, we'll buy all of the old stuff that you have because we needed inventory. And you want nicer, newer stuff anyways. So like, why not
it's wood for your furnace, John.
Yeah.
Something like that. But how did that lead to the fintech? Like why did you get into that stealth fintech you're building right now?
Yeah, well, so I want drugs to be better developed, right? I want people to be able to get access to medicine in a way that's more effective.
Also, cost plus style Mark Cuban type of.
No, so I'm really happy that Mark Cuban is doing that because that's a necessary thing. But this is more about innovating like on new drugs, like things that don't exist yet, right? Like creating things that haven't been. And the problem is that it's really difficult to know whether biology is going to be successful or not, because we don't really have a deep systematic understanding of ourselves. We also don't really have a good understanding of like how these different systems play out across a whole bunch of different clinical trials. And so this is really what it comes down to. I wanted to make drugs better. So I started an antibiotic drug development company early on. No one cared about antibiotics, even during the pandemic. So then I went.
Antibiotics even scale in this super virus world we're living in?
So antibiotics focus on bacteria and
Super
antibiotics.
bacteria, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I mean, we need antibiotics. I think it's really, really important. We're not incentivizing antibiotic production, and it's mainly due to reimbursement issues. Basically, like with every other drug, you get reimbursed separately from the hospital visit, but with antibiotics, it's just not. And so there's no incentive to make new antibiotics from a scientific or financial perspective until there's another pandemic, unfortunately. But I went from making drugs and trying to sell a drug to pharma companies to then trying to make pharma services where we helped any company make their drugs better. But I realized that there really wasn't an incentive to do better, right? If you can make somebody 10 to 20% better at their job, they'll pay you through the nose, because that's something tangible, right? That's 4 to 8 hours that they get back in their life. But if you make somebody 100 to 200% better at their job, that's insulting, because they then don't know what to do with the other like 23 hours of their week. And so in their mind, it's really like it's scary, because they're like, well, we only need a third of the people here if that's really what's happening. It's like, well, no, you can do 3 times as much stuff, right? But people don't think that way. They're like, what am I going to do with the other 23 hours? And it's like, do more work, right? Like that's like the whole point.
Innovate.
Right, exactly.
Experiment more, etc. So you're at the intersection of financial market and biotech nowadays. So it's a less strong leverage than your previous one, but money is still a strong thesis of yours to accelerate the drug pipeline.
Well, so what I realized is that if you want to change a scientist's mind, you don't ask another scientist to do it. You ask a funder to do it.
Okay.
So, selling science to scientists is nearly impossible. Selling science to investors is very unprofitable. A founder is going to listen to a funder rather than another founder. And if you want to make drugs better at scale, you have to basically affect the public markets. And so what I realized is that you can predict whether or not a clinical trial is going to be successful, and you can explain what good looks like in the public markets. And if you can successfully predict those clinical trials being successful over and over and over again, you can basically change how all of drug development is done, because you're basically creating a blueprint that says this is what good looks like, this is what profitability and success looks like. And if you do this, your retirement is going to be a hell of a lot better, because your stock price is going to mirror the work that you've done, rather than yeah.
So you scrape the research data, you have an AI analyze it, and you sell the software and the data of that to funders?
No, I mean, so initially we thought that was what we were going to do. There's a lot of companies that do some version of this. But what it came down to is every company does a component, right? Like they're trying to predict, when is something going to happen? What is the magnitude of that event? Things like that. And so what we realized is that, much like any other system, so like, again, I study how things evolve and adapt over time. Financial markets are like any other organism. You have a pressure, you have an event, something happens, and it changes the system, right? Prices will fluctuate, are changed based on like what happens in China, what happens in the markets in what happened in Boston. A conversation that happens at JP Morgan in January is going to affect somebody's stock price. And so yeah.
So you pay people at JP Morgan to give you that data, analyze it, or what? I know it's still in stealth mode, but was it like general concept? You have third-party sources feed that data, and what, for example, how often are you right over your predictions of if this clinical trial is going to pan out or not?
Yeah, so it depends on how much capital we want to deploy. Basically, what it comes down to is we have a confidence interval for each one of these things. Over the last, I don't know, I'd say 3 months, we've been right about 75% of the time.
Pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, hey, if you're right 51% of the time in the market,
Yeah.
you know, you're making a ton of money, right? And we're right about 75% of the time, which is pretty exciting.
Is it
And
more
like,
consulting side of things? Like, do people pay you first, or is there like a software component, self-serve to it?
yeah, no, so part of the reason why I'm being a little evasive is like, so our customer, we're not planning on having customers, in the sense that we work with. Our job is to use this information to generate money from the public markets.
Okay.
So we're going to be investing directly into the public markets. And so our customers, so to speak, would be people who are giving us money to invest based off of that information. We're not, we're not selling that information to somebody else. We're using that information directly.
Roger that. And you already have the fund sources secured. You already have like your own internal network, I would guess, of investors.
Yeah. So all of that stuff is being done, through the people that I know. So there's no like public offering or general solicitation or anything like that. It's all done, based on people that I know and who I think align with the goals of what we're trying to do.
And is money really the solution, or would an AI that an in vitro AI be a better solution to accelerate drug discovery?
So I think the biggest issue that we have in drug discovery is that people have egos, and they get in the way. So a lot of the tools that we're building to predict whether or not a clinical trial is going to be successful, those tools necessarily help a pharma company, predict which companies that which drugs that they should move forward with, which clinical trial designs that they should be developing, what constellation of clinical trial sites that they should be, addressing to get a successful clinical trial outcome. Like all of these things, can become tools in the future for pharma companies. But what we've learned is that until there's a specific pain that is in excess of what they're currently dealing with, these tools, it's just not worth our time to sell these tools directly to these companies. That is going to need to happen, but the way to create that need is by demonstrating definitively in the public markets that if you don't use these tools, the outcome is, a negative clinical trial. And as a result of that, your stock price is going to go from whatever it is to nothing, right? So like whatever your retirement was going to be based on this, like it doesn't matter, right? Like, you don't have a retirement package in this publicly traded company if the drug doesn't work. And so it's to your benefit to make sure that anything that you do makes sure that the drug works or that you're developing something effective.
So what is the moat of that one? Like, what is preventing someone else from doing that one? And what's your survivability prognostic for that one? Do you think it has 80% chances of surviving over 5 years, this startup?
Oh yeah, no. So the nice thing about this is that the system as it stands is pretty effective, right? Like we're already at 75%. We only need 51, right, to be profitable. So we're there, right? We're already there. Really, what I'm interested in is how do I maintain that edge over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years? And how do I use the data and the network that I have to make sure that we maintain that data edge? And I think the nice thing about YC is that because there are so many founders who are looking for ways to use their data in a monetizable way that they currently don't necessarily aren't thinking about. And I have access to the network. It makes it just easier for me to get access to data that other financial institutions just wouldn't get access to.
Love that. And okay, what does a day to day in your life looks like? Because I saw you. Are you still investing, by the way? Or are you fully dedicated to that startup?
Yeah. So I mean, let's see. My day to day is pretty much, I don't know. So I wake up, go to the gym, and then paint actually is what I typically do. Painting is a great outlet. It allows me to like just think about all the different things that need to get done and be creative. Because most of the time, like it's not about the actual product; it's about how these different components like fit together. And so I do a lot of that. Then it's mostly like coding, calling people, talking to other founders, just doing informational interviews. A lot of what I do is trying to get information saturation, which is to say, I try to talk to the fewest people possible, and I try to get to a point where everyone's saying the same thing to me, where I'm not getting any new information. And if you are good at asking good questions, you can hit information saturation pretty quickly. And so that's something that I try to do, because you don't need to reach out to 10 people if 3 people will do, if you're getting the same answers over and over again. And I think it's part of the reason why you're like, no one cares about culture, everyone's heard about it, like what are the new things?
Yeah, that I mean, if these are 3 high quality nodes, right? But I still find valuable data even in less successful people, because it's like what not to do, right?
Oh,
It's
hell
like
yeah.
anti-goals. It's interesting what you just mentioned. Yeah, one of these examples as of late was that no one is not bullish on the fact that AI will. Okay, let me rephrase that. So I spoke to like over 3,000 founders and CEOs in the last couple of years, and everyone agrees on the fact that AI is going to replace a bunch of jobs. 80%, I think, would be the number in the next 10 years. And at the beginning of the AI revolution, most people weren't agreeing on that. A lot of people were resistant to this, and even the AI people. What's your thought on this, the AI thesis and job replacement one?
um I think it needs to happen, right? Like I think a lot of like even in the art world, right? Like people are like, oh my god, like AI is getting is replacing like creatives, and it's like, well, no, AI is replacing like low quality creatives, right?
Yeah.
It's replacing people who don't really know how to be good at their job, I guess. Like in every field there is a distribution of like people, like it just naturally there's a distribution, and like the bottom standard deviation, like those people should be finding something else. And AI, I think, is going to be replacing that segment of the population. And I think a lot of times most people that fit in that segment of the workforce, they're just not aligned like personally with the work that they're doing, right? Like there isn't either that personal motivation, or they're doing it because they think they need to be doing it, or because of whatever else. And so I think AI is going to do a really great job of helping kind of remove that lower, standard deviation set of people, and help them find things that are better in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, find their ikigai, right? Sort of. Yeah, but ikigai is more than just passion, right? It's also like what people can pay you for, what you're good at, and so forth. Maybe AI could guide them towards a profession in which they're good. Do you think there are some moats against AI? For example, humor is one that comes to mind, or highly creative activities that AI couldn't go after.
So I think it's about application, right? Like AI is like any other tool, right? Like a shovel is only useful if you use it, right? And a shovel can be used to make like a grave. It can also be used to pot plants. It can also be used to build the largest mine in the world, like but it's still just a shovel, right? And so like what happens is uh, people can use this tool to do things that other people wouldn't think to do. But like the application of that tool is, I think, the more important thing. And I don't think people realize that, right? Like you can use AI to do bigger, greater things, right? Like it's just like the previous example. People are like, oh my God, what do I do with this? Like, other 23 hours of my work week. It's like you do more, right? That's what you do. You do more things that are more impactful. You don't do less. You don't.
And what's on the roadmap to AGI, in your opinion? Do you think Sam Altman is on his way there, or do you think would be more like the Elon way, in which we're giving AI a body and then it can understand the physical world and scale from there?
So I used to think I knew what was going to happen, a year from now, 5 years from now. I have learned that as a scientist and as somebody who can push the boundaries of things, I'm really good at what I know. But so much can change. I have no freaking clue, right?
Let me ask you that instead. The roadmap to curing all diseases, which is a pretty weak front thesis, but do you think we can cure cancer in the next 10 years, for example, with AGI?
10 years, no. I think within our lifetime, yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why we can't. The number, and really what it came down to is data and our ability to read biological data at scale. And so much technology is being poured into sequencing and imaging and spatial omics and all this other stuff, that now we're going to be able to apply these large data sets and these different AI models to really understand how biology works in the body, and how do we develop drugs that long term prevent us from getting cancer, or prevent us from dying if we have cancer. So I think we're getting to the point where within our lifetime, you and I, if we get cancer in the next 20 years, it's not going to be a death sentence. It's just going to be another thing we have to do every month.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've seen AIDS a huge progress in that field, and even some cancers were death sentence, but through breakthrough discoveries like leukemia, for example, we've drastically extended the longevity of people suffering from these diseases. Do you feel that most of the progress will be done in the clouds in vitro, or do we still need physical experiments to happen in this physical world?
So we still need physical experiments to happen in this world. I think the problem is that we have a lot of people in that lower quartile of scientists who are producing a lot of shit data, and because there's all this shit data being produced, it's muddying all the stuff that's real, right?
Word.
Yeah, you can think about all the AI models that are trying to train on Reddit, and it's well, half of the stuff on Reddit is bots. So you're just training a bot on a bot on a bot on a bot. It's yeah. So I think AI is going to be really useful in helping get rid of that shit.
Yeah, how can an AI know that this scientist is just producing a bunch of vanity bullshit papers? Is that an easy thing? Can it easily spot the flaws in the experiment?
So I think so. So I mean, this is kind of the predication for what I'm doing, which is to say, people make the same mistakes in science over and over and over again, and they teach other people those same mistakes, right? They're this is how you make the same mistake, even though in their mind they're not this is a mistake. They're just this is what I've done for my entire life. But the consequence is that it is a mistake, and it does have it does prevent us from moving forward in a way we just aren't aware of it. And so I think AI has been really useful for me in going through and sifting through millions of papers and saying what's real and what's not.
So we've talked about crap scientists. What makes a genius scientist, someone that has a huge impact? Because from the get-go, we're not attracting them with money, right? Academia is pretty dry on funds. So what makes a great scientist, and how could we attract more of these great scientists?
So I think what makes a great scientist is persistence and humility. I think that a lot of people stop before they get where they need to go, or where they're and then once they get a level of success, it immediately goes to their head and they kind of just rest, right? They stop pushing. And so somebody who has that humility where they're I'm not where I want to be, right? Like this is great, but like I have another 40 years of my career, and if I just like rest on this, like it's going to be a waste of 40 years. And so I think that there are two ways that can be done. One is by helping scientists when they're being trained to recognize that academia is not the only thing that they could be doing, right? That there are a whole bunch of different options, and that the role of a professor is to build like a small company in an academic institution, right? Like they're basically building a lab, they have a budget that's independent of everybody else's. And so like, you know, if that's the case, if that's the goal, if your goal is to be a founder, right, of your own lab, go be a fucking founder, right? Like instead of like trying to figure out how am I going to do science that's going to get me money from the government, like try to figure out how are you going to do science that's going to get me money from anybody else, right? Because there's no difference, you know, it's just where the source of income is from.
Right. Do you feel that we could convert like these older scientists into founders? And I probably already know the answer to that one. And do you feel the future of science would be founder led for faster discovery?
I absolutely think that the future of science is going to be founder led for faster discovery. I think that what you're going to start to
Is
see,
that what you want? Yes, what will happen, right? Because that's what I want also.
yeah, that's what I want. Because being blunt, like, you know, I'm so tired of talking to academics where they're like, I have this great idea, and it's like, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
who's this product for? And
That
they're
is
like,
blasphemy for a YC alumni.
well, it's just it's so annoying. Like, it's just like have a reason to do something.
I want to start this business next year. It's like, yeah, just do it right now. It's like that's already too much words.
Right. Just like what's stopping you? Like what limiting belief do you have? Like, oh, I need more data. Oh, I need more of this. It's like, well, no, you don't need more stuff. You need more confidence. You need more of, you know,
Balls.
risk-taking ability. Yeah, exactly. You know, just
What about giving consumers the ability to lead their own experiments? Could we like have a platform, a marketplace for that sort of?
so I think that's actually a really interesting idea, right? So like we're doing that with AI because it's easier. Like more and more people are able to experiment with AI. They're able to experiment with large language models. And I think it's just due to cost, right? Because like, you know, the cost of computation is a lot, you know, it's a lot less. But I imagine that there is going to be a class of people who absolutely can do this. So there's this great company called Arcturus. Arcturus, yeah. And what they do is they have like an automated lab system. So you can essentially design an experiment, run your experiments, you know, on their system, and then they'll give you the results. And so like level of like experimentation, like that is essentially what we're doing with AI. Like I want you to create this thing, writing out a sequence, writing out an experiment, writing out something that the AI then spits back. And so in the future, I absolutely believe that more and more people are going to be able to do that, where they don't necessarily need to run the experiment themselves, but they can tell a machine what they want done, and that machine can run the experiment for them.
Love that, dude. Not gonna take more of your time. Definitely gonna do it round 2 next year. Where can people find out more about you till then, Nick?
You can find me on my LinkedIn, Nicholas Goldner, PhD. That's about it for right now. I am trying to stay a little bit stealthy with what we're doing.
Stealthy low key.
Stealthy low key. But you know, if you ever want to talk kiteboarding or painting, or you know, how to sell things that are really, really difficult to sell to people who don't want to buy, I'm your guy. So just
All right. That was Nick.